some important memories that comes with it. I've known Craig for a while. I served with Craig on the Equity and Justice Committee for Isaacs, and I was a young pup at the time, and being very much in awe of Craig and his wisdom and his knowledge, and wondering to myself, what is this school, Wellington in Columbus? It sounds magical. And never did I realize that at that point our paths would cross again, and here we are. And what a joy it is to work with Craig. And if you came in earlier, you know that Craig has been with us since 2005 at Wellington. Chris was also one of the first people to welcome me when I interviewed. I remember talking to Chris and being very much struck by how much Chris cared. And I remember there was this point where she said, "Come here, you have to see this in my classroom." Brandon Sullivan is trying to get me to go to the airport, and I love art. I also love art when it's made by a student and it also resides in the classroom, and I was riveted. And Brandon's trying to get me to go to the airport. Chris was also one of the first people to email me and to welcome me, and very excited for me to be here. So I think the world of both of them. And Chris is celebrating 30 years. So 1991, she joined Wellington. And I feel so lucky and blessed to be in their presence and to be the beneficiaries, as your children are, of their wisdom and knowledge. And if there's something that they do that really inspires me, it's how they have honed their craft and how they have kept learning and evolving. And that is the best lesson that anyone can take, including our kids. So again, as I've seen a few more people filed in, so we have Ms. Robbins and Mr. Jones. The feature looks different. You can't see each other, but we are recording too. And if you have questions, and there'll be time for that, you can put that in the chat and the Q&A. I'm going to turn off my video so we can give Chris and Craig our full attention, and I'm going to get our show started. So Chris and Craig, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Rishi, for that introduction. And yes, I'm Craig Jones. I'm the upper school counselor here at Wellington. Welcome, good evening to all of you. And Chris Robbins and I are here to share with you the Courageous Conversation protocol that was designed by Glenn Singleton, and explain that protocol, as well as how we use it here at Wellington with your children. As a way of kind of beginning, I just want to maybe talk a little bit about how I was introduced to the protocol. About 5 years ago, I attended the NAIS People of Color Conference as an affinity group facilitator. And it was there that I was introduced to the protocol we were fortunate enough to have Glenn Singleton be a part of our training. And was really blown away by it, and thinking about how, wow, this is a great way to have civil discourse. And so I brought it back to Wellington and shared it with Chris in part, and anybody I kind of came in contact with, thinking about not only how you can have courageous conversations about race and racial topics, but how just courageous conversations about challenging and difficult topics. And so I think I've been using it then since for these 6 years now, both here at Wellington, and we continue to serve as a facilitator, affinity group facilitator at NAIS POCC, where we still use the protocol. So, and Chris?
Yeah, so my involvement came every time Craig goes away to one of his conferences. He comes back and we usually talk and I say, how was it? And he'll tell me the interesting things that happened. So I remember him talking about this and really didn't give it a whole lot of other thought, because the school year was, it was almost the middle of the school year by this time, and things happen. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I found myself at the end of the first trimester, at the end of my 10th grade English class. And I was a part of a conversation where kids were starting to talk very openly about themselves, about their experiences, the identifiers that they have. And it was just kind of an open conversation. And I can remember that the conversation kind of went south, because we started talking about one topic, and it was kids talking about what it was like to grow up and to be Black. And another student who was not Black interrupted and then ended up shifting the conversation in a different way. And I remember walking out of the classroom because I went back to the original students who were going to talk, who were eager to share their own experience. And I said, well, you were going to say something. And they said, no, it's okay. And they completely shut down. And as a teacher, that's the worst thing that I could experience, was knowing that there was a student that was really eager to share their perspective, to share their story with others. And then because I let the conversation turn, they no longer wanted to do that. And so I remember very distinctly leaving the classroom. I had a free period next. I went to Craig, went in his office, closed the door, said, I really messed up, burst into tears, didn't know what to do. And he says, okay, well, let's talk about it. And out of that mistake that I made, that I take responsibility for because I was the facilitator in that room, out of that came a desire to say, how can I do this in a better way? And so we had 2 other trimesters. And if you know about the 10th grade English curriculum, the kids cycle through. I teach 2 trimesters and Catherine Dyson teaches 1. So we were going to cycle through to a new group of students. And I had to figure out how to make this right. So Craig ended up coming in. I still had that same group of students. Craig came in and we did a presentation with that group to try and get us back on track again and try and have conversations that were courageous. And so as the school year developed, this was another 3 or 4 months of school, Craig and I started talking about how do we start off the year right next year? And we decided to create a version of what you'll see tonight as a PowerPoint for kids. And we presented it to them as part of their opening days as 10th graders. So we had all of them in the room at the same time. And we were able to go over what the protocol is, how we were going to move forward. And then in my individual English classrooms, whether it was mine or Catherine Dyson's, who also teaches 10th grade English, we were able then to build on that. We had a common language and we could build on that. And when we knew something was about to, in the course of studying the book, if we knew there was a point where things were going to be a little awkward for people, I would say, okay, let's remember what our agreements are. And it helped to kind of center them. So that's how we kind of got here. We found it to be really helpful. And as Craig mentioned, not only with conversations about race, but with conversations about anything. It's a great way to have civil discourse. Am I missing anything, Craig?
I think so. It's perfect.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to share my screen with you. We have a PowerPoint to go through. I will take probably about the first half of the PowerPoint, kind of setting things up, and then Craig will take over from there to discuss the particulars of the protocol. So again, this is a version of what we do with the 10th graders every year. Even this year, when kids came back, it's a very different year. And so we had them split into 2 groups, and we were able to do it. We had kids that were also Zooming in. So we were able to do it with them both in person and by Zoom. And then we're also continuing to do this in the classroom. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. This works. Okay. Craig, can you see that?
I can. Perfect.
All right.
Got it.
All right. I hope everybody can see this. I'm going to pull this down. Okay, so as Craig mentioned, the Courageous Conversations information that we receive and that we use is based on the work by Glenn Singleton, such high regard for him. And whoops, sorry, there we go. The first thing though that we're going to talk about before getting into the protocol is the difference between a safe space and a brave space. And so what we tell the kids is that we kind of grow up thinking about where are our safe spaces, where are the places that we know that we can go and be, and really know that we're not going to be confronted by anything. We talk to kids in lower and middle school about stranger danger and where's your safe space and who do you go to if you have a problem. But in Courageous Conversations, we found that the safe space is not always the right space, because a safe space, according to Merriam-Webster, the safe means free from harm or risk, affording safety or security from danger, risk, or difficulty, and unlikely to produce controversy or contradiction. Well, that makes sense. If you're being threatened about something and you want to have a space that is safe for you, my house is a safe space for me, right? I'm comfortable here. I can kind of let my guard down, let all of you into my kitchen as we're doing this. It's a safe space for me, but it's not going to really provide that controversy on its own because I'm in that safe spot. And what we know as faculty members too, but also as ever growing adults, is that learning necessarily involves not merely risk, but the pain of giving up a former condition in favor of a new way of seeing things. A lot of things have happened to me in my life, a lot of things that I look back and I think, wow, that was really tough. Like, would I change what happened to me? And every time I think about the most difficult things that I've had to encounter, I wouldn't go back and change any of that because I learned from it. There was risk, there was pain on my part, but at the end of the day, when I come back, I am a better person because I had that risk, because I had those growth pains. So we know that we want to have that kind of growth, that risk, and giving up a former condition in favor of a new way of seeing things or a new perspective. So by comparison, a brave space, the goal of a brave space is to encourage participants to be brave in exploring content that pushes them to the edges of their comfort zones in order to maximize learning or understanding. Again, this is what we are as a school. I want kids to be pushed. I tell my own two children, if you are getting all A's, there's no reason for you to be in school. I need for you to be pushed. I want to make sure that you are learning something. I want you to maximize your learning, you maximize your understanding, whether you're in school and learning about a specific topic, or whether you're having a conversation with a friend whose family looks very different than yours does, or who has views and beliefs that are different than yours. And we know that's tough as kids, that's tough as adults to do as well. So that brave space, again, is going to push people to the edges of their comfort zones. That's where that maximized learning and understanding is going to take place. While we're in that brave space, we want to keep in mind that we want to have controversy with civility. So in this model, different views are expected, but also honored, with a group commitment to understand the sources of disagreement and to work cooperatively toward common solutions. As a parent, sometimes I fail at this. There's a disagreement and I just want to be right. I want my kid to listen to me and to do what I say. But if we're really looking at a courageous conversation, we're having this controversy with civility. It may be talking to my child about why, no, I don't want you to get in a car and drive because the roads are bad and it's dark and I'm worried about that. So we have a disagreement of this. How can we work cooperatively toward a common solution? You want to go out at some point this weekend? Okay, we're going to find a different time, or I'll drive you. You have a different thing. Now, that's easy when you're talking about driving with your teenager. It's much different when you're talking about some other hot topics, and whatever those topics can be. So those different views, you may have a different view than your child does. Your child may have a different view than a classmate. I may have a different view than a colleague, but those views are expected and honored, because what I want to really know is, how can I understand what your experience is and where you're coming from? And I can pause for just 1 second to go a little bit deeper into that. This is really important and why we found that introducing this to 10th graders was so important. In the 9th grade, we're really talking about a transition to upper school. We want to make sure that the kids have study skills, they're learning, they're getting used to the upper school, all their grades, things like that. By the 10th grade, they've done it. They've done it for a year. And so what we want in the 10th grade is to push them a little further. So we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird in 10th grade English, and we're going to be talking about language. We're going to be talking about situations. We're going to be talking about the 1930s and the 1960s when it was written, and today, and what topics are common throughout those 3 time periods. And so being able to talk about things that people might not agree on is really important as we're talking about the book, as we're talking about topics that are brought up in the book and how people are still seeing some of those topics today. Okay, go on to the next one. Along the line, we want everyone to make sure to own their intentions and their impact. This is something that we have to go over a couple of times, sometimes for the kids to really understand, that the impact of our actions is not always congruent with our intentions. and that positive or neutral intentions do not outweigh a negative impact. One of the things that I like to tell the kids about is, like, I have an interaction with my younger daughter, and my intent is to protect her, is to care about her, to love her, and to try and help her to get on the right path with her schoolwork. But if I say it in a way of, well, how come you didn't do this? And did you think about talking to the teacher? And did you do this? The impact of that may come across to her as if all I'm ever doing is criticizing her. And I don't want that. I want to be able to talk with her. This has taken me a while to learn how to do. How do I approach my child when I want to be able to help her, because I can see 4 or 5 years in the future where I really want her to be, and she doesn't have that perspective. But even though my intentions may be positive or even neutral, it doesn't outweigh negative impact. If I look at her and say, "Are you wearing that today?" Like, that might not be a bad thing in my mind, but for her, it's an immediate criticism, right? Why are you asking me that? Well, don't I look good? I don't look good, do I? Kids can think of all kinds of examples of that. I'm sure you can as well. I found that this is really important to do with colleagues. My intention and my impact may not be the same thing. I may really have good intentions on giving advice to a colleague, and yet what it comes across as is perhaps maybe the way that I said it is that I was being too bossy, I was being too direct. That's how they're taking it. I can't control that impact, but I have to understand the impact is there. And so recognizing, hey, something I said may have had a negative impact on you. This is kind of hard for kids as well, because kids are like, well, I didn't mean it, right? Well, you took it the wrong way. Oh, what I meant was, well, you're just being too sensitive about it. And that doesn't lessen the impact. That just drives that impact in deeper. And so one of the hard things that we teach kids is to sometimes say, we got to step back and just say, I am really sorry that my comment affected you that way. I want to make it right. And that's it. Just being able to own up, to acknowledge that your intention had a negative impact, and acknowledging that, and then figuring out how can we move on from there, right? It could be that that person had a bad day. It could be you had a bad day. How do we move on from this point and recognize the fact that something that was said was hurtful? And then we found this slide that was created by Joseph Oteng. He is, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, he's studying law. Is that correct, at Ohio State right now?
Law student at Ohio State.
Law student at Ohio State. He's got a great Instagram account that we've seen. And this really stood out to us, because oftentimes we hear people talk about being unsafe. And we don't want people to feel unsafe, but we also want to recognize that there's a difference between being uncomfortable and unsafe. And we thought that there's a lot on this slide, but we thought that this was a great way to show that. So the comfort zone that's right in the middle of that target, that's the safe spot, right? When we started off this conversation, it was, what am I safe? Where am I safe? Where am I feeling safe? Where am I physically safe? That's our comfort zone. The stretched piece is where we want that discomfort, that expansion to happen. That's that middle gray zone there. And we want kids and adults to be stretched. Learning involves being stretched in your comfort zone, outside of your comfort zones. What we don't want is to be stressed. That's the unsafe zone. When a conversation gets to the point that the voices are raising, that the tension is rising, we want to take a step back and maybe revisit some of the things in the protocol and say, okay, let's remember this, instead of getting to that stress point. I will tell you that my stress point often happens when I am talking with my kids about something, because I immediately go there, right? I don't want to be stretched. I'm just stressed all the time about this. I need to start practicing that more. I'm much better at school than I am with my own kids about this. It's always a process. Okay, so we want to target that stretched area, get outside of the safe zone, and not get into the stress zone with the what we're about to show you. Okay, Craig, you ready to take over?
I'm ready. I think I am. Okay, so what we're sharing now is what we want to do right now is get into the protocol. And as we mentioned before, Singleton designed the protocol to focus on dialogues about race. However, what we've discovered is that we can use it to engage in discussions about a variety of different difficult topics, LGBTQ+, so sexual orientation, gender, religion, politics. The protocol really does help us and help the students really engage in a meaningful conversation about a variety of topics. The bottom bullet point you see there is sort of, again, the courageous conversation utilizes 4 agreements, 6 conditions, and a compass in order to engage, sustain, and deepen intraracial and interracial dialogue about race. And I'm going to pause here for a second and say, again, reminding that the protocol was designed about race. However, again, we use it in different ways. So in the slides moving forward, you may see identifier. That's us, I guess, modifying Singleton's protocol a bit to be more inclusive of other identifiers. Anyway, the Courageous Conversation protocol is an essential foundation for examining and addressing institutionalized culture and structures that promote racial disparities. Go ahead. So again, a courageous conversation engages those who won't talk, sustains the conversation when it gets uncomfortable or diverted, deepens the conversation to the point where authentic understanding and meaningful actions occur. So you see those 3 words, each bullet, the first word in each bullet: engage, sustain, deepen. Those will show up again because really what this is, I think I often say this is about establishing meaningful dialogue versus debate. Oftentimes I believe that I think our default setting, when we interact and have conversations with folks, tends to be debate, right? Where there's an end game, there's a win or loss, there's a convincing of your position, right? Winning someone over or being won over. Courageous Conversations is about sharing perspectives and ideas, and at the end of that, you still may very much be rooted in what you believe, what you think, right? How you feel, but you have new information to chew on and think about and kind of ask those questions like, what if they're saying is true? What does that mean? What does that mean for me? Okay, and that's where the stretch happens, right? You can still be very much in your safe zone, but maybe you've expanded your comfort zone, that safe zone, to include those perspectives. And when we can acknowledge different perspectives, not even necessarily understand, but just acknowledge them, I think we can move along in our conversations about challenging topics, including race, religion, and so on, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay. So the 4 agreements of the Courageous Conversation: to stay engaged, which, why don't you just give me all the bullets, please? Sorry. Okay. Stay engaged. So, we say, like, we ask you to be, sometimes you maybe have been a part of a conversation. We want to say, we want you to be present. A speaker or presenter may say, I want you to be present for this conversation, right? For this workshop, right? Staying engaged in a courageous conversation means that you're remaining morally, emotionally, intellectually, and relationally involved in the dialogue. You are fully present, right? You are saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself to be vulnerable here, right? I'm not going to just operate on a 30,000 feet level and have this sort of scholarly talk, but be tuned into what I believe, how I'm feeling during the conversation, and how it applies to my life, how it applies to me and those around me. Again, you don't allow yourself to check out, right? You don't, if you're experiencing discomfort or, there's that impulse, right, to fight or flee, right? You may want to check out, right? You're saying, okay, this is getting a little, I'm starting to shift in my chair a little bit, but I'm in it, right? I'm in it because the other participants are, so I'm going to stick with this. The next agreement is allowing ourselves to experience discomfort, right? So we're going, again, stay engaged in the tough conversations that make us feel uncomfortable. It allows us to deal with the reality of race and racism, as well as other topics, in an honest and forthright way. And when we do this, we build muscle, right? We're increasing our tolerance for discomfort, so that we increase our ability to address the challenges associated with racial achievement disparity, right? As well as other disparities, right? So building muscle is so important, right? We got to build our skills. We can't just, every time it gets hard, run away. That's not something that we want our students to do, right? We want them to kind of lean in, okay? Next agreement. When we lean in means speaking our truth, right? Being absolutely honest with our thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and not just saying what you perceive others want to hear. This can be really scary, especially for students, right? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I mess up, right? In a small community like Wellington too, right? I'm gonna say a thing, I'm gonna step in it really bad. We're gonna walk out of class and everybody's gonna know, right? And they're gonna think this of me, and it's something horrible and horrific. Okay? In a courageous conversation, we're agreeing to speak to stay engaged, experience discomfort, and speak our truth. We understand that sometimes in that conversation, people have what is called a first draft, right? So you're saying something off the top of your head, or maybe this is growing up, this is how you've believed or learned, and you say something and someone has to stop you and check you and go, whoa, or what we call our oops or ouch moments, right? Right? You realize you've made an oops because someone has said ouch. And it doesn't stop and shut the conversation down. It's a moment, again, to learn and go, all right, something about what I just said, something about that draft, I need to revise. This is an opportunity for me to kind of learn and understand and ask questions, or have someone explain to me, right? But we have to speak our truth in order for that to happen, right? To not speak our truth leads to deeper confusion, mistrust, and misunderstanding. And quite honestly, the space then is not safe, right? It's not safe to be brave if we're not being honest, if we're not speaking our truth, right? And again, this allows us to fully engage and develop our consciousness. And the last agreement, and this is oftentimes really tough. Again, we're thinking about that default versus debate versus dialogue, right? We have to expect and accept non-closure, right? We're engaging in a conversation, we're sharing ideas and perspectives, and then for students, the class period ends, or we run out of things to say, or we've kind of reached sort of this ending point, and we rule out any there's no quick fix. And that can be unsettling. That can feel uncomfortable, but we may want to describe it as a stress, right? Because, wow, that conversation, Ms. Robbins and Chris and I had a conversation about politics, right? And it got emotional, got even a little passionate. And then she had to run off and go teach class. And I left in my office, and I'm thinking, it's not done. Like, she's wrong, but she's wrong though. But she's wrong, and she needs to understand. She didn't admit that she was wrong, and I'm so caught up in that, as opposed to thinking about, right? Maybe this is an opportunity to revisit the conversation with her later, right, and continue on, right? We engaged, right, but the next time we talk, we speak, we can sustain that conversation, because it's like, I want to follow up on some of the things that I heard. I've processed some of what she said, what she shared. I hope that she has processed what I have shared, and the two of us now can continue on with our conversation. All right. So courageous conversations, again, this is, again, for some folks who like things to be wrapped up nice and neat, right? This can be one of the hardest agreements, is that it ends without that closure. Okay. All right. So I mentioned before, there were the words engage, sustain, and deepen, right? So the 4 agreements are something that, again, all participants, again, we're all in. We're going to follow these agreements. These conditions, and there are 6 of them, and they happen in this order, kind of provide, I guess you could say, provide the container for the conversations to happen, right? And there are 6 conditions, and recently Singleton, what he's done is he's grouped them together, kind of two at a time, into 3 different tiers. And so the first tier, tier 1, is engaging. Okay. So in the first tier, you're going to establish a context that is personal, local, and immediate. Okay. And then we're also going to isolate the identifier while acknowledging the broader scope of diversity and the variety of factors and conditions that contribute to the problem. So what we're doing here, I talked about how in these conversations, we're coming down from 30,000 feet and talking about it abstractly. We're not talking about politics kind of in a way of like the politics in the world out there, or race in the world out there. We're talking about race, politics, LGBTQ plus issues as it relates to me, as it relates to my personal experience, as it relates to life in Columbus. Okay, so it's much closer proximity. The context is much closer to us. And I mentioned just a variety of identifiers in my example, talking about personal, local, and immediate, right? But we're sticking to one identifier while at the same time acknowledging and recognizing the intersectionality of the other identifiers. So if Chris and I are talking about politics, right? And, then I bring up, say, well, as a Black male living in Columbus, here's some of the challenges I have with some of the political systems and political leaders, right? So you need to understand that it's difficult for Black people. Well, what we hope is that of course we can acknowledge, like, sort of that there are ways that politics impact individuals of different identifiers differently in different ways. But what we don't want to do is now switch the conversation to talking about race, to talking about religion, to talking about socioeconomic status, okay? But keep it on politics if that's the identifier that this courageous conversation is based on, okay? So that is tier 1. That is engaging. That's just saying, hey, we are going to do this. We're going to go there, folks, right? Hey, kids, we're going to go there, and we're agreeing we're going to stay there, right? Engaging takes a long time. And when I say a long time, what I mean is you don't say, well, we engaged, we had a conversation, so we engaged, on to sustaining. No, engaging can be 2, 3, 7 conversations, okay? It can be, a week to a couple months that we engage. We just engage. We just get comfortable with it, right? When we've gotten good at engaging, we move on to tier 2, which is sustaining. Okay, and remember too, these 6 conditions happen in this order. So now when we're sustaining, we're developing an understanding of identifiers as social political constructs of knowledge and engage multiple perspectives to surface critical understanding. And we monitor the parameters of the conversation by being explicit and intentional about the number of participants, okay? So when we've come back after multiple conversations, right, of engaging, right, and we've been able to share perspectives, sustaining looks like I'm revisiting my conversation, my political conversation with Chris, and maybe Rishi and Ms. Monak and Dr. Turwin, right? We've all had a courageous conversation. We've been engaging for a while. And I've heard perspectives of those other individuals. And now when I come back, I'm not necessarily entering that conversation or, asking to continue that conversation, still trying to get my perspective acknowledged, but maybe I've done some thinking about what Chris has said, what Dr. Turwin or Rishi has said, and saying, I've done some thinking about it, and like, and I have a question, or I want to challenge that, right? I'm still working through this. I still don't understand how you are thinking this way, or how you hold this perspective, okay? We're sustaining the conversation now. We're no longer trying to do sort of introductory kind of ideas and information, but we're moving forward again, and maybe again growing, expanding the conversation upon those multiple perspectives that have been shared. But we're also, again, explicit and intentional about the number of participants too. And I was thinking about this earlier, a way to kind of explain this is, if the conversation happens with 5 people or happens in Chris's class with that class, right? Certainly we may want to go off. So if it's natural kind of behavior to go off, right? And want to go find, again, thinking about that debate versus dialogue, we may want to go off and talk about what we experienced, but also find our people, right? Find our people who think like we do and believe we do, right? And then say, yeah, you know what? Chris was having a really hard time. She wasn't hearing me. So let me go get Mr. Hansen, right? I'm going to bring you. Need to come. You need to come to this and join in. Well, he does not necessarily going to agree to the 4 agreements, adhere to the 4 agreements. And he hasn't even heard all of the perspectives that have been shared. I'm bringing him in as like ammunition, right? To win. Courageous conversations will break down. We will not sustain a courageous conversation when that happens, right? So a classroom discussion Chris has, and as a facilitator, she's kind of holding the space to sustain it, right? We're not going to add more students into that section, right? So 10 people, maybe 15, right? And even that's stretching a little bit, right? We don't have a courageous conversation of 100 people. It doesn't happen. So it's small and intimate. That allows also, as you see there, for everyone participating to be mindful of not only what's being said, but also the emotions, right? Because at the same time that we're having this, somewhat intellectual, we're very cognitive, right? We're also trying to regulate, right? We're also doing this emotional regulation, right? This does not happen it is very, very real for us to get in our feelings, as we talk. So we can speak with passion. People speak with passion in courageous conversation. Volume levels go up, right? But hopefully the content of what's being said does not enter that stressed area of threatening, manipulating, dismissive language. Okay. And so when things are really getting good and we're grooving, right, we hit tier 3, deepening, right? We've established an agreement around a contemporary working definition of an identifier that is clearly differentiated. So if we're talking about race, we all know if it's a conversation about race, we all know how we're defining race or that racial issue or topic, right? And we also are examining the presence and role of privilege and its impact on the conversation and the problem being addressed. If Chris and I are talking about gender roles and so on, as a male, right, I am acknowledging my privilege, right? I'm speaking from the perspective of a man. I'm trying to, and so hopefully reducing my mansplaining, right? To make sure that, again, the conversation goes deeper, right? And hopefully Chris can see that and hear that in my comments, that I am acknowledging, maybe even before I say something. It's like, well, you know what, let me say here that I'm speaking from the position of a male, right? When I say XYZ, okay? So those are the 6 conditions. And as I said, when we're working with students, we, the adults, are kind of in that facilitator role and are kind of, I'd say, creating the container through these 3 tiers, okay? Okay. And the last piece of the protocol is the compass, okay? And so what Singleton says is that when we enter a courageous conversation, we enter from one of these 4 quadrants, right? Some of us initially have an emotional response, right? So we are feelers. We may be talking from personal experience, right? So, again, if we're using race as an example, right? So talking about my personal experience, my personal interactions with law enforcement growing up, or maybe within the city of Columbus, okay? And how that has affected me and shaped kind of my feelings about law enforcement. Go ahead. Intellectual, right? Initial responses to search for more data. So, these are individuals who might start the research has shown, right? Well, or some kind of statistical right? Response. That's how they enter, and that's how they begin the conversation. That's how they engage, right? They're coming in thinking, right? Where did you learn that? Where did you hear that, right? Can you give me a site? Give me a source. What website? They grab their phone and go to Google, right? Believers are based on a deep sense of righteousness or wrongness on a particular issue, right? Growing up, I was taught to believe, to see everyone as human beings, right? Not to see color, just to see people as human beings, right? Treat others as you would have them treat you, right? Do unto others as you have them do unto you, okay? Believers. And then the last one, acting, right? Focusing on action steps to address the issue. Yes, I know that, this is a problem, right? This is an issue, but what are we doing about it? Or what can we do, right? We don't need to go into whether it's right or wrong, or, what you experience and stuff. What are the action steps? How do we solve it, right? Let's not waste our time telling story after story after story. What are we going to do about it, right? So we all come from one of these, enter a courageous conversation from one of these quadrants. The key here is to spend time in that courageous conversation visiting the other quadrants, right? So maybe you heard me say, as someone is speaking to you or sharing with you, listening, trying to hear and acknowledge and give validity to what they're saying, but also asking yourself the question, what if what they're saying is true? What does it mean? What does it mean for them? What does it mean for that individual? What does it mean for me? Okay.
Greg, can I add something just
Yes,
on the
absolutely.
end of this? So, our one of our goals tonight was to present this to parents because we present it to kids, but also to hopefully help you facilitate conversations with your own children. And so as a parent, I look at this compass, and I've said this a couple of times, there's a difference between what I am doing as a teacher in the classroom and then what I'm doing as a parent with my own children. In the classroom and at Wellington, I live in that emotional feeling part. Ask anybody. That's where I tend to live. My heart is right there with everybody. When I'm at home and my own child comes to me with a problem that she is like really being emotional about, I flip into that acting stage. I'm like, okay, but what are you going to do to solve this? How are you going to bring that grade up? What are you going to do? And I have to try and stop myself and think, where's she coming from? That's what Craig was talking about, like visiting those other segments, those other sectors. That's hard to do as a parent. It's gotten a little easier as I've been practicing this, though. Okay, Craig?
Yeah, the last piece, and this is something fairly new I've learned about the protocol, is just that what happens when we are not doing, when we're entering sort of one of these quadrants, right? We have that initial response, but then we don't visit, we don't make that effort, we don't, it's disrupting our engagement in the conversation. And so Singleton's talked about what's behind the compass are these shadows. And so you want to pop up the different things. So we have believing, thinking. You can put them all up. Okay. So if you're a believer, right, it looks like disbelief, right? Like that can't be the case, right? That can't be like you got stopped by the police for having a crooked front license plate. No, that didn't. It must have been something else, right? That's a shadow. That's your resistance to engaging, right? It's an example of resisting the invitation to engage, right? Ignorance is you don't know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous. Like that's stupid, right? We've often maybe heard something and responded that way. We've dismissed an individual's perspective. We've shut the conversation down with that kind of phrase. Simple little ones, but it's enough to kill a conversation, right? Fatigue. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of hearing about this and nothing's being done. I can't talk about this anymore. I can't talk about COVID and washing my hands and wearing a mask. Like let's talk about vaccines or something. Like let's just move on from that. Like we know we have to do that. I can't get into like hand washing, right? I'm tired of hearing about hand washing, right? And then the last one, fear, right? What will they think about me if I speak my truth, right? What will happen if I speak my truth, right? What will people think of me? those shadows are what will prevent or disrupt an individual from engaging, right? And if we can't engage, if we can't get to that first condition, right, we are not going to have a successful, courageous conversation.
Okay. That is the end of our slides and our information. There he is. I knew you'd come back. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Mr. Raghunathan.
I won't. I was waiting. So thank you. Thank you for that. And we have about 14 minutes left, and we're right on schedule. And if any of the parents who are here have a question, please put it in the Q&A. And we're watching the chat also to see if there's anything there. And so I guess what I'd like to do is, when I was taking notes on here, what I wanted to add is this year, especially given it's my my second year, and I had to talk with the faculty, and we spent an incredible amount of time preparing for this year with COVID. And in fact, the 4 agreements are how we had our difficult conversations around school reopening. And it's no secret that we all came to this from a variety of different places. And if going back to that last slide, thinking about the fear, the disbelief, and all of those things that they mentioned, that's what we faced. So when we started faculty meetings, I realized that this was a different year, and we had to be okay with non-closure. We had to speak our truth, and then ultimately come back to what was the larger purpose that was driving us. What were we here trying to do? How were we doing our job as teachers? So that is how we start faculty meetings, with the stay engaged, experience discomfort, speak your truth, expect and accept non-closure. And so while I was talking, a couple of questions came through. So the first question we have, I think it's an easier question, so let me start with this one, is are the 10th graders taught the 6 conditions?
Good question. So as you can see, there's a lot of different parts to this. And as we also said, we're trying to look at kids where they are in school. 9th grade is about learning how to be in high school. 10th grade is diving into this a little more. So we start off the school year with focusing on the 4 agreements so that we have common language. The 6 conditions are things that we're kind of working in the background right now to do, to kind of, we know those, and we're paying attention to the engaging and sustaining and deepening and where those levels of conversation are in the classroom, but we don't specifically go over that. This was a 45-minute presentation. I know y'all are probably tired of too, from looking at the screen and listening to us. And so you can imagine how 10th graders are in the classroom, trying to keep them engaged. And normally I'll have a mask over my face. So, that's hard to keep their attention. But then in 11th and 12th grade, Craig, do you want to talk about the course you teach?
Yes, so I co-teach a course called Race and Identity with Victoria Pang. And we review the protocol, and we do go into the 6 conditions. We do elaborate and talk about the 6 conditions. What I was also going to say is this summer, Chris and I offered a 2-week Courageous Conversations enrichment course. So 2 weeks, we had sufficient amount of time to kind of dive into the conditions and really talk about them, and even talk to students, tell students, like, again, we were sort of, again, holding the space and kind of serving as a container initially, but then we were able to say, hey, I think we're moving, like, based on how things are going here, this is looking like you're in tier 2 now, you're in tier 3 now. We started with a topic, on Tuesday morning, it's now Wednesday at noon, and you want to keep going. We've continued that conversation. Right. And this is the 2nd week that happened. We really didn't see that happen in the 2nd week. So. And
it was 3 hours a day for 2 weeks. So that was, quite a bit longer than what the kids are in the classroom too.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So here's another question. Have you had questions? Have you had students who have perhaps attacked each other? And if that's been the case, when things get a little heated, how do you navigate those dynamics?
I would say in the classroom, that doesn't happen as often. Most of the time in the classroom, it's examples of kids, like Craig said, like really stepping in it. And sometimes the kids will go, okay, this is going to sound really stupid, or this is a stupid thing to say, or this might be taken the wrong way, or whatever. That's more likely to happen than kids attacking each other. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There are some heated conversations, but as the facilitator in the classroom, as that teacher, my role is to go, okay, hold on, we're going to stop here for a second. Let's go back. And it might be halfway through the conversation. Let's go back to the agreements again. Let's go back to those 4 things. We're talking about speaking with civility. Let's remember that. Let's talk about brave and safe space. Let's talk about the stressed and the stretched place and where we are on this. Let's take a breather for a second. And that's time for me to start talking so that they're kind of backing off. And then in the cases where I have felt that there's more tension than I'm comfortable with, I will keep a student after class, talk to them about it. I will catch up with with another student later on during the school day, whether it's lunch or break or something like that.
Yes. And if it happens to have happened right at the end of class or maybe even end of the school day, it's important that we make the effort to circle back the next class period, next day, to kind of circle back with the student to check in, right? And temperature check, but then also even next class, we start the next class with, I want us to begin with what happened at the end, right? And talk about that, and let's revisit that. Here's what was said. We need to do a temperature check. Okay, was that an oops, was that an ouch, right? Or there was an ouch moment and then the music played and everyone grabbed their stuff and walked out of the room, right? We need to revisit that ouch.
Yeah. We had one of those, and we ended up coming back. It was right before lunch, and we ended up coming back, and a whole group of students came back after lunch. And thank you, Mr. Reganathan and Mr. Jones. We were able to talk to them in the classroom and spent an entire other next period talking through things because they were engaged and they were invested, because these were kids who were friends and had been friends for a long time and are now seeing that they have different views about things, and they wanted to stay engaged and try and talk. And it was, I felt the outcome was very positive.
Oh, I remember that, and I was also impressed in how well the students were managing their emotions and trying to find that common ground. Couple more, so we have about 3 more questions. So as you think about our time, the first question is are students graded on how well they follow the protocol, or are they graded on the substance of their comments?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Neither, really. In my classroom for discussion, in the 10th grade, we have daily discussions, and I tell kids that what I'm assessing them on, it's you know, I have a little card, right? I have a card, and I'm writing down like how many times kids participate in class, but that's really just to kind of keep tick marks. What I'm also paying attention to isn't just, hey, I participated, I asked a question. It was, did I build off another student's comment? Did I listen to what was saying and bring that back around? How did I engage with the conversation? And so kids, what I have thought is that, like, if you're getting a 9 out of a 10 for a conversation in class that day, that's a really good grade. I tell my kids, I'll tell all of you parents, it is very rare for me to get a 10 out of 10 on a discussion post or a discussion in class, because you always have something that you can add to it, right? How could I be a better listener sometimes? Am I a person who's always talking in class? Should I really focus my comments on what somebody else is saying and show that I'm listening to them instead? So that's a great question, but I don't sit there and say, well, you did not follow step number 3, so you get, you know, that's not it, right? And as for the substance, I also tell the kids that, like, we're talking about these issues. I'm not asking you to agree with me if I happen to express something. I'm not asking you to agree with that. I'm asking you, what do you think? I really want to know what you think. I tell them I can sit all day long and talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. I can tell you about all the characters and everything that happened. I've directed the play twice. I can tell you anything. That is less meaningful to me than knowing, what do you think about it? Yeah. I don't want you to just spit back what you think I want to know. I want to know what you think about it. How is that tied into you and your daily life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question to ask sometimes. What is your proximity to the topic? right? And I said, none, I don't have any. Okay. But if it, but then think about that, why that is. Think about why that is, or if it were different, right? For someone where they're in closer proximity, what does that mean for them, right? And being able to start helping them work on how to articulate that. So, yeah, great question. There's two more questions. One's in the chat and one's in the Q&A, I think, right? You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I'm going in order.
Okay.
So this question is thinking, so I want to finish thinking about the student experience, and then the next question will be about how parents can support kids. So the question is, for teenagers, is there one approach on the compass that's more effective, less effective? So what have you seen in your classrooms?
Great question, and thank you for asking that, because it made me remind something I didn't mention about the compass, right? No, there is no one quadrant is stronger or better than the other. All these quadrants should be viewed as strengths. And we think about if you bring folks from different quadrants together, how enriching the conversation can be because of the multiple the different perspectives they can provide, right? So there isn't a, well, I'm like, oh, you're a believer. Oh, sorry. We're a feeler and a thinker here, and we rule. No, it's all of them are strengths and should be viewed as such. There is no weakness. Again, but spending time, but it's, again, more than anything, spend some time in the various quadrants as you listen, as you engage. So.
All right, and then the question would be what would be how can parents support students in the role of courageous conversations? And so what role can they play at home or in supporting their kids?
Talk to them.
Yes, my hope, our hope is that as you learning about this protocol tonight, maybe doing a little more research yourself, maybe even, and try it out, try it on. If you're the parent of a sophomore, this is happening right now this year, right? How did 10th grade, how did Miss Robbins' class go? What did you talk about, right? What kind of conversation, what did you talk about? What did you share? What did you hear? What do you think, right? Engage with them. If I was sitting in that class, here's my thoughts. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? And again, have that, open dialogue and listen.
It's really easy for us to have our kids come home from school or pick them up and drive home. And what would you do at school today? Oh, nothing. Or, you get those answers, but really starting asking some pointed questions. Have you heard kids talking about this? What do you think about that? The what do you think about that is going to throw your children, and just give it time. And if they say, I don't know, well, you have some thought, like, well, what do you really think about that? Right? Let's talk about this. I have found that they really do want to talk about these issues, bigger issues. They want to talk about things that are going on in the world. They want to talk about gender issues. They want to talk about racial issues, LGBTQ+ issues. They want to talk about all of this stuff, and they don't know where to do it. I had a kid ask me one time last year or the year before, and they said, how come we haven't learned this before now? And I said, tell me where in the curriculum that you're going to put this out and say, okay, today we are going to talk about these terms. We're going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about this. Like it's in there, but when do you decide to go deeper into the conversation? When is it age appropriate to do that? What can we do as parents better? Talk to the kids, and they're going to resist at first because there are children, and my kids resist talking to me sometimes about things, but don't give up on it either. Approach it. If they shut you down, say, okay, I really would like to have this conversation with you. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe you're dealing with something. Maybe you didn't have a good day. Can we come back and can we revisit this? Would it be okay for me to ask that again? That I found that's a good way to work too, because then you're engaging them. You're asking permission for that. And I think we're right at 8, Mr. There you go.
Right. Okay. So I want to be respectful of our time. It is 8 o'clock. We promised to keep this crisp at an hour. There are a couple of the questions in the chat, and I think we will definitely get back and respond to that. So if there's something else there, and I also really encourage you to reach out to us directly. We believe this work to be important. We believe in the civility in that conversation. That's really the key. And what I'm always struck by when I visited Chris's class and Craig's class is seeing how students respectfully speak their truth and understanding that we are, complex human beings, and and there's a lot of complexities that add to who we are too, and how they navigate that is quite beautiful and quite amazing. And I'd really like to end on what I've heard time and time again is that what we're proud of at Wellington is that we teach kids how to think. And we don't tell them what exactly they need to be doing, but how to do it. And that is the strength of our program. So Chris, Craig, thank you. I'm thrilled to have spent this hour with you, and thank you to our parents who attended also. So this will be available for as a recording. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, wow. Ooh. You still there? Muted, can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm just waiting to see if Cassie will, I think, stop the recording. So I just want to make sure.